No German gutter crown, and time of troubles down. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Dugdale, MEDMA. We are Duncanville High School in these United States, and today is October 20th, 2020. And on this date in history, in 1781, the Revolutionary Army defeated the British at the Battle of Yorktown, and the United States actually won their independence on that day. So, in my mind and my heart, we should have been off from school, well, yesterday. So, uh, anyway, uh, everyone have a great day, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Now we're moving on to the Edict of Fontainebleau. Okay, so the Edict of Fontainebleau, what it does is this tries to undo everything that had been done for the Catholics. Okay, so it revokes the Edict of Nantes, which gave the Huguenots equal rights. Remember, the Huguenots are French Protestants. It closes Huguenot schools and destroys all the Protestant churches. Many of the Huguenots at this point are going to flee to one of two places, Germany and England. And so one of the things that they won't see until later is a lot of the people that are Protestant are some of the wealthier people. There are some of the people that could afford to lose some of the support from the Catholic Church. They were people with trades. So you have a lot of skilled laborers, and you have a lot of bankers, merchants, artisans, merchants, that are all kind of kicked out at the same time. So many of them are people of means, or at least with the ability to get means, and places like Germany and England welcome them in to take advantage of their skills. Louis XIV really wanted his dynasty to dominate Europe, and so over the years he's going to try and do things to put his family into important places in other kingdoms. He puts one of his family members on the throne of Spain, which if Spain had been the same Spain from the last 100 years before this, that might have meant something, but this is a crumbling Spain. Louis also takes his time to try and move into some of the other areas too, the Academy of Sciences. So they're trying to increase the French prestige in the study of astronomy, medicine, and navigation. Because in order to really be a great explorer, you really need to know what you're doing. Medicine, again, most of Europe, most of the world was pretty backward as far as medicine went, and again, astronomy goes back to the whole idea of navigation. And the French Academy of Arts, they started patronizing artists. And patronizing an artist doesn't mean you're making fun of them or anything like we talk about, quit patronizing me now. This meant that you had support financially as an artist, and instead of having to do any other type of work, you had someone that was helping to pay for your development. Now you had to do certain things for them, but you also got to develop your skills as an artist. A lot for one slide. Jean-Baptiste Colbert, okay? He is put in charge of the finances of France under Napoleon the 14th. And he is trying to stretch the dollar out because almost every penny under Louis XIV is going towards the building of Versailles. Okay? So they're trading with the French East India Company so they can get into those Asian markets. And so this is whenever they start to build a monopoly on several different types of businesses. They have a unified internal market. You have manufacturing codes. The state controls the most important industries for money. You have a royal navy, so they're trying to build up a large navy also to compete with some of the other countries of the world, especially after some conflicts with Sweden in the time period before this. So one of the ways to keep the support of most of the nobility was to give them exemptions from taxes. So mainly the poor people were the ones that were paying taxes. The Marquis de Louvas was the Minister of War, and he created an army of 400,000 people. And a lot of this goes back to Sweden, which was thought to be a major threat coming up. But Sweden instead just decides, you know what, you guys are all idiots. We're going to do what we do over here and leave the chaos and stupidity to all of you to go do whatever you want to with that. Okay? So Louis did have the largest army at that point. So the Dutch War. So Louis the 14th invaded the Spanish Netherlands. Okay? This is really what is currently Belgium today. Okay? So he invades the Spanish Netherlands, and he took Burgundy, which really unites all the French land together, that we know today. And so you have this War of the League of Augsburg. So in this war you have England, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and Sweden taking on Holland and France. And as a result of the war, nothing changes. It's just a lot of useless bloodshed that, really accounts to nothing. And in the Treaty of Ryswick, Louis XIV is going to give everything back, but keeps these two areas, Strasbourg and Alsace. Alsace is going to be something that's going to cause a problem with the German Confederation, and this is something that's going to change hands right before World War I, then change after World War I, and the slap in the face that, well, anyway, it's a very controversial territory that really doesn't do much. So, Spain, once one of the most dominant nations in the world, is starting to fall apart. They still have control of their colonies in South America, but they have less. They also had large parts of Africa and Asia. Philip II, who was the son of Charles V, was constantly at war, and eventually he's going to go bankrupt because of all the fighting that he did. So his son, Philip III, takes over. And he spends money all around his court, all around the house, but nowhere outside of that. He does not look at how the rest of the world is modernizing, and he is staying with the times. His armed forces were out of date. They didn't have modern weapons. The government was inefficient, and a lot of Spain is separated by mountains. So unless you have some strong system in place, you have no idea what's going on anywhere else. Okay, the Duke of Lerma, who is his financial minister, creates power and wealth for his own family. So, just whenever he thought he could count on them, it turns out that he really couldn't. Okay, so this is going to lead to yet another member of the family, and look at how pathetic that chin looks. It's very Habsburgian. It's a very weakening chin. They actually have a term, the Habsburg chin, to talk about that. So he has so Philip IV also has a finance minister who, instead of making himself rich, tries to take care of other people. Okay, and this is Gaspar de Guzman. He is a Count of Olivares, and he's trying to cut down the power of the Catholic Church and the aristocracy. So the richest people of Spain are starting to be put in the outs, and it's going to hurt him and take away some of the support he has. Okay, and if you remember earlier, we talked about the 30 Years' War, and under that, in the Battle of Rocroi, the Spanish army was defeated. They're almost all destroyed. So there's not really much in place protecting Spain. They don't have a large standing army in the nation. They're still separated, so this causes a lot of problems here. The Peace of Westphalia, Holland gets its independence, and in the Peace of the Pyrenees Mountains are the ones between France and Spain. Spain's going to give up all of its remaining land in the Netherlands and land in France. So Spain is starting to reel. Now, they're going to keep most of their territories in the Americas for another 150 years, but it's not because of a great job done by the people in Spain. So when Philip the fifth fourth dies, blah, 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 okay, it's then left to Charles II, and Charles II is going to leave the throne to his grandson. Wait, no, I'm sorry. It's going to leave the throne to Philip V, who's the grandson of Louis the 14th. Remember how I said everyone was really everyone was related and inbred? Well, that's where this confusing little piece comes in. Okay, so Europe felt that France and Spain would unite their thrones and become this powerhouse. And by the way, you don't have to worry about Spain doing anything significant. Okay, Spain is still kind of a joke. Okay, so England, Austria, and Holland decided they were going to fight France and Spain. Ultimately, the outcome, nothing major happens here. I mean, well, actually, there are some major things long reaching, but ultimately, Philip the Fourth or Philip the Fifth is going to get his kingdom. Okay, Austria gets some southern Dutch lands, which is far away from where their nation is, which becomes really more of a problem for Austria than any type of solution. England gets Gibraltar, which it still holds to this day. Okay, Gibraltar is at the very southern tip of Spain, and as a result of having that territory, where do I want to go with that? Well, they kind of control what goes in and out of the Mediterranean Sea. So it's a very important point. Okay. England's also going to get Nova Scotia, which is all in North America, Newfoundland, and Hudson Bay. So big, large chunks of Canada now all belong to England. And for the next 300 years, the Bourbons, who are descendants of Louis XIV and really every other family in Europe, so don't get the idea that it's completely changing everything, because it's really keeping everything still within the family. Okay. So, moving on, let's look at another place where people are doing whatever they want with their own family members. And that's absolutism in Prussia. Okay? They had a massive army. Okay? But the army did more to control what happened in the nation than the other way around. Okay? So Brandenburg and Prussia, these two territories that are about 150 miles apart from each other, really unite into one kingdom, and this will kind of be an ongoing thing for the next, well, really for the next 200 years until they're really in one nation, and then World War I will separate them again. There's a total of about 2 million people there, but they don't have many natural resources. Okay, now, one of the ways that they survive and thrive is a combination of a few things, where you have a skilled and resolute leadership, the Hohenzollern dynasty. The way that they use their resources makes them more valuable, and the large military tradition. Prussian soldiers were quite feared at that time and should have been feared at that time. And you can see that on the map there, they start to grow their territory. Again, how you grow territory that doesn't touch yours, I'm not quite sure, but they definitely terrorized and took what they wanted. So the Hohenzollern dynasty, they started ruling Brandenburg in 1415, and they get Prussia through inheritance in 1618. You would think that at some point that all of these European nations would have united together, just because everyone's related, and at one point they all had to be first cousin or brother and sister and just unite massive areas, but that's not really how it works. But the 30 Years' War is particularly hard on the on Prussia Brandenburg. Okay, and part of that, Berlin is burnt almost down to the ground, and Berlin's much more of an important city after the 1930s than it is really before then. Okay, it still has some significance, but not like it, does even today. They also gained some land as a result of the Peace of Westphalia. So this is a group to watch, and this is a group that's ultimately going to unite Germany together in one kingdom over the next several hundred years. Okay, and even in the interim, you're going to have some very important people that come out of that do important things in battles. That's very vague, so I'll fight you if you have a problem with it. But I'm too tired now. Okay, actually, I'll take that back. Let's not fight. Let's just kind of lazily look at each other, slightly angry. There. So Frederick William the Great Elector. So we're going to have Frederick William the Great Elector. We're going to have Frederick William the First, and those are different people. So I don't know why he wouldn't be the second, but we're not here to fight that. Okay? He began the Prussian state and started a civil government. Okay? So a civil government, this is where people would start to have full-time jobs working for the government. The Junker, or the Prussian nobility, Frederick William began to take control of them and gave them positions in the military and positions over the serfs. And all they had to do was pay taxes. Okay? And all the taxes were used to fund an army to help protect everyone's rights and privileges. And by the way, if you're looking at Frederick William, the Great Elector on the left, man, boy does he sport a hard double chin. I mean, I don't know how you do that kind of portrait of a man with that much power. I would think make me more attractive if I look like that. And if I do, please don't tell me that'll hurt my feelings. But yeah, I would make them get rid of my double chin. Okay? So also during his time in power, he sets up the General War Commissariat. Okay? And this would collect taxes and watch the army. They put together monopolies, so the government controls all the major businesses. They raise tariffs to get people to buy their own goods within the country. And they start to welcome Huguenots after the Edict of Nantes because they wanted their economic skills. This is whenever we're talking about the artisans being kicked out of France. I'm guessing that was, I'm not going to lie, I can't remember if that was today or last time or the time before, but it's definitely in this unit. And you know, this is something we really have to look at because of the consequences of just getting rid of a large group of people that are skilled laborers. Okay, well, say goodbye to Frederick William, the Great Elector, and now we're going to look at his son. And that would be Frederick William the First. Again, should be the second, but we're not going to fight that battle right now. Here in the title, the King of Prussia, after helping the Habsburg Emperor during the War of Spanish Succession. Okay? Again, he is separate from his father. He patrolled the streets. He was always looking for a fight. He sounds more Irish than he does German, but anyway, we won't get into that. He spent the majority of his family's household budget on building an army. And he started to put merit into government service. So no longer was he just, you're in a position of power because your father and grandfather were. He was looking for the best of the next group, of the third estate, looking for the best of them and putting them into positions where they were part of the nobility also. And he did a really great balancing act because the nobility doesn't get really upset about this. Now, some of the people that take over for him in the future really do, but we're not here to talk about him. Okay, so Austria. Okay, Austria. These are German speakers also. Okay, so if anyone says they speak in Austrian, they are liars. Yeah, they're liars. It's actually German. Okay, so they create a new empire, and you have a Habsburg emperor over the top of them too. So a super inbred guy with a horrible looking chin. Okay, he was the Archduke of Austria. So at one point he was the Prince of Austria, the King of Bohemia, and the King of Hungary. You hear the term Hungary and Bohemia, and they're really the same regions. Okay, same people. But each area of Austria at this point is going to have its own laws, its own Congress, and own political life. So It's much more of a confederation than it is a unified empire. Empire. Empire, 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 empire. Okay, so let's look at great Austrian leader. You heard that was singular, not plural. So Eugene of Savoy, okay, he helped defeat the Turks in 1683, and under his reign, he adds. By the way, his name's Eugene. This might be the only great Eugene in history. If I have any Eugenes in my class, then obviously I mean so far. Okay, so he adds Transylvania, Hungary, and the Balkan Peninsula, and he wins territory from the Peace of Utrecht. Okay, in the Treaty of Karlowitz, they take control of Hungary, again Transylvania, Croatia, and Slovenia. Okay, so these are the treaties where he gets a lot of this land, and they also will later get the Spanish Netherlands and some Spanish land in Italy. Italy actually makes far more sense for them to add than the Spanish Netherlands because there's a big chunk of German land between Austria and the Spanish Netherlands, but Italy is connected to Austria. Sorry, I don't know. I can't get really excited talking about a guy by the name of Eugene. Okay, so Leopold I was a king or emperor of Austria, and he is a guy who pushes into Transylvania, and the Ottoman Empire goes and smacks him around, only to be saved later by Eugene of Savoy. I mentioned Eugene earlier because he's much more worthwhile than stupid Leopold I. Okay? By the way, if your name is Leopold, you're not going to be a good leader. I'm sorry, all my Leopolds out there. Okay? Charles VI, one of the things he does is he puts a lot of effort into making sure that whenever he dies, that his daughter Maria Theresa takes over the throne. And she does. She gets to be in charge for a total of 40 years. And he was really concerned that without a male heir, that they were going to run roughshod over his daughter. So a lot of what he does is to try and ensure that she has a safe reign. And it does work. So, cheerio to you, Charles VI. You protected your daughter. You know, what every father hopes is their legacy. Okay, so looking at what happens with Italy. Okay, Spanish King Charles V took Italy from France in 1530. So right now we're looking at at least 100 years before the 100 Years' War, and so he then puts his son in charge of Italy. That's Philip II, who bankrupts Spain. We talked about him earlier. So I don't know if that was such a great move. It was really under the control of the Spanish monarchy, but after the War of Spanish Succession, Austria takes control of a lot of these Spanish regions of Italy. Let's talk about someone even more beaten than that, and that is Russia. Okay? Now, if you look at Russia on the map here, the majority of Russia is in Asia. Okay? So Russia is a much more Asian nation than it is where do I want to go with that? More of an Asian nation than it is a European nation. But the great majority of people live really on the west side of the Urals and the Caucasus Mountains. So, you know, that from that aspect, they're much more European, the majority of the people, and a lot of the outposts in eastern Russia are just, you know, it's not a lot of people being added. Okay, there's not a lot of people that live there. Ivan III, Ivan the Great, drives the Mongols out of Russia, and Ivan IV helps drive them out of Central Asia. And they create a middle class in Russia for a short period of time called the Streltsy. And they're going to become problems later on in history, But the biggest problem is going to come as a result of Ivan the Fourth killing his only heir out of fear of what he's going to do. So this is going to lead to a infamous time called the Time of Troubles. And the Time of Troubles is a 15-year period after the death of Ivan the Fourth, Ivan the Terrible, where he kills his heir and crushes the boyars, also known as the Russian nobility. Okay, so the National Assembly, okay, also known as the Zemsky Sobor. Now, this is not the same legislature they're going to have about 300 years later, but it was a group of electors that decided they were going to choose Michael Romanov. Okay, so Michael Romanov and his family will be the leaders of Russia for the next 300 years. Well, 304 years. And really 306 before, or sorry, 305 before Nicholas and his wife, son, and four daughters were all killed violently. Okay? Now, Russia is very backward. Like I said, it's far east. There's not a warm water port, so it's not really easy to stay in contact with what's going on in Europe at the time. Okay? So they're disconnected from Europe. They're still running the feudal system. So you still have serfs and feudalism in Russia until the early 20th century. So right before World War I is when they start to really move away from that. And you could buy and sell serfs. So if you didn't like what your serf was doing, you could sell them to someone who had less, and just as punishment. So rebelling serfs are going to join a warrior tribe called the Cossacks, but still the Cossacks are not going to cause many problems. But you do have, as a result of Ivan the Terrible, the rise of the Romanov family and the Romanov dynasty that lasts for 300 years. So we'll talk more about what they do here pretty soon. But like I said in the last unit when we were talking about Louis XIV, there are some ties between what Peter the Great's going to do and what Louis XIV did. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. We finished yet another day. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone is excited. We are pouring through European history, and I don't know, I'm pretty jazzed by what's going on. Anyway, I'll talk to you soon if you have any questions. Have a great day. This is Mr. Dugdale, and I will see you on the other side.